The stars shone brightly above the capital world of the Zyori Empire. From the wide balconies of the royal palace, Princess Illyra often looked at those stars and wondered how many secrets they carried. Her people had traveled the galaxy for centuries, building a proud empire known for its wisdom, strength, and tradition. Yet now, the empire stood at a turning point. The wars with other star nations had left scars. Too many battles had been fought, and too many worlds had suffered. The Council of Elders had advised the royal family that peace must be secured, not through more warships or weapons, but through alliances. And so, a marriage was arranged. When Illyra first heard the news, she thought it was a cruel joke. She, a princess of one of the oldest empires, was expected to marry not a noble from another royal house, not a general of great renown, but a human from Earth. Humans were newcomers to the stars. They were still young compared to the ancient races. Many in the galaxy looked at humans with a mix of curiosity and doubt. To Illyra, the very idea felt unthinkable. She sat in her chambers, her golden robe flowing across the marble floor, as her closest advisor explained the council's decision. "Your Highness, the humans have shown courage in defending their home world. They have earned respect among some allies. This marriage will bind Earth and the Zyori Empire in unity. Together, we will stand stronger." Illyra's emerald eyes narrowed. Stronger? Or weaker? To tie our fate with theirs is to lower ourselves. What can humans give us that we do not already have? The advisor bowed his head. They give us the promise of loyalty. They give us numbers. And most of all, they give us the chance to avoid another war. Illyra turned away, looking once more at the stars. She knew her duty. A princess was more than a daughter, she was the living symbol of her people's pride. Yet in her heart, she felt fear. What sort of man would this human be? Would he look at her as a partner, or as a prize? Days later, the human delegation arrived. The great hall of the palace filled with dignitaries, guards, and scholars. The humans walked among them, dressed in dark uniforms that looked plain beside the shimmering robes of the Zyori. At their front walked Captain Daniel Hayes, the man chosen to be her husband. Illyra studied him with cautious eyes. He was tall by human standards, his dark hair neatly kept, his uniform carrying no jewels or ornaments. Unlike many who stood before her, he did not bow too deeply or boast with flowery words. Instead, he placed his hand over his heart and spoke with calm respect. "Princess Illyra," he said, his voice steady, "it is an honor to stand in your hall. I come not only as a representative of Earth, but as a man who wishes for peace between our peoples." The court remained silent, watching every move, every word. Illyra gave a slight nod, keeping her face calm though her mind raced. She had expected arrogance, or perhaps nervous flattery. Instead, he spoke plainly, without excess. Was this humility? Or was it cleverness? Throughout the ceremony, Daniel carried himself with quiet dignity. He listened more than he spoke. When questioned by the elders, he answered directly, without pretending to know more than he did. Illyra noticed how he looked at the hall, not with greed or envy, but with curiosity, as though he truly wished to understand. Still, she did not let her guard down. In her mind, she told herself this was only the beginning. A single day could not reveal a man's true nature. Humans, she reminded herself, were unpredictable. Some called them passionate, others reckless. Could such a man ever be worthy of standing at her side? That night, as the palace grew quiet, Illyra returned once more to her balcony. The stars glittered like 1,000 eyes watching her. Somewhere among them was Earth, the home world of this man she was to marry. She sighed, her heart heavy with doubt. Perhaps, she whispered to herself, this is the price of peace. But deep inside, a small voice wondered if this human might prove to be something more. The palace of the Zyori Empire had seen many ceremonies, yet the gathering that followed the human delegation's arrival felt different. The air carried a quiet tension. Noble families whispered from behind their jeweled masks, wondering how their proud princess could ever accept a human as her partner. Some doubted it would last a season. Others believed it was a clever trick by Earth to rise in power through marriage. Princess Illyra walked slowly down the steps of the great hall, her long silver cloak trailing behind her. Every movement was graceful, every glance measured. She had been trained from childhood to show strength in public, no matter her private feelings. Yet inside, her heart felt unsettled. Captain Daniel Hayes stood waiting near the council table. Unlike the nobles in their golden attire, Daniel wore only his dark earth uniform with a silver crest at the chest. He looked plain compared to the lords and ambassadors around him, yet he stood tall and steady, as though the weight of the eyes upon him meant little. When Illyra approached, he gave a small respectful nod. Not too deep, not too bold. Princess Illyra, he said in a quiet voice, I thank you for receiving us. I hope I can prove myself worthy of the trust your council has placed in me. His words were simple, almost too simple. Illyra studied him carefully, her green eyes sharp. Was this humility, or was it a practiced mask? The council may find trust easily, she replied, her voice calm but distant. I do not. Trust is something earned, not given at a ceremony. Daniel did not flinch at her tone. Instead, he gave a faint smile, almost kind, though not mocking. Then I will do what I can to earn it. Her guards shifted uneasily, unsure if the princess would be angered by his calmness. But Illyra simply turned and gestured toward the long corridor. Come, Captain. We will walk. The halls of the palace were filled with tall glass windows that looked out upon the shining capital. Skyships glided above gardens and towers, their silver trails painting the horizon. As they walked side by side, silence stretched between them. At last, Illyra spoke. Your world is young compared to mine. Why do you think the Zyori should bind themselves to humans? Daniel looked out the window at the ships before answering. Because young worlds grow. Because even the smallest tree can one day give shade. And because alone, neither of us can face what waits in the dark between the stars. Illyra tilted her head, studying his face. His words were not poetic, but they were steady. He did not speak as a man seeking favor, but as one who believed in what he said. Still, she refused to let her heart soften. Do you not fear this task? She asked. To marry a woman who does not wish it, to live in a world not your own. Daniel gave a slow breath, as though considering his answer. Fear? Yes. But fear is not always weakness. Sometimes it is a sign that what lies ahead truly matters. The princess turned her gaze away, hiding the slight shift in her expression. She had expected arrogance or blind confidence. Instead, she found honesty. Later that evening, the council hosted a banquet. Noble families presented gifts of jewels, rare crystals, and ancient scrolls. When it was Daniel's turn, he offered no treasure. Instead, he placed upon the table a small carved figure made of simple wood. This is from my mother's garden on earth, he explained. She carved it when I left for the stars. It is not costly, but it carries the warmth of home. I wish to share that warmth, if you will accept it." The court fell into whispers. A wooden carving, in a hall of priceless gems. Many expected the princess to reject it with scorn. But Illyra paused, her eyes fixed upon the little figure. It was shaped into a bird, wings spread as if ready to take flight. She felt something stir in her chest, something she quickly buried. She lifted the figure with slow hands. "Strange," she said softly, "that something so simple should stand among treasures." Daniel bowed his head slightly. "Sometimes, princess, the simple things last longest." That night, when the banquet ended and the palace halls fell silent, Illyra placed the carving by her bedside. She told herself it was only out of politeness. Yet as she lay awake, she found her thoughts returning again and again to the human who had brought it. Perhaps, she thought, this beginning was not as simple as she wished it to be. The days after the banquet were filled with ceremony, lessons, and endless discussions about the alliance. Princess Illyra attended each one with a calm face, but her mind was restless. The little wooden bird sat on her table, its wings spread as if it might take flight, and every time she saw it, she felt uneasy. It reminded her that the human, Daniel Hayes, was not behaving as she had expected. She had prepared herself for arrogance. She had thought he would boast of human strength, or perhaps show pride in standing beside a princess of the Zyori Empire. Instead, he spoke with quiet respect, asked questions rather than making demands, and treated even the palace servants as equals. Illyra did not know whether this was a mask to win her trust or the truth of his character. One morning, she decided to test him. The council had arranged a cultural exchange, where Daniel would be shown the sacred gardens of the palace. These gardens were thousands of years old, filled with rare flowers and glowing trees that carried light within their branches. They were not merely beautiful, they were symbols of Zyori history and pride. Illyra guided him through the winding paths, her long silver robe brushing against the polished stone. Daniel followed quietly, his eyes moving not only to the grand trees but also to the smallest streams and birds that darted between branches. "These gardens," Illyra said, her voice steady, "are older than your nation's first steps into space. Each plant is cared for by generations of my people." "What do you see, Captain?" "A display of wealth. A symbol of power." Daniel paused near a pool where glowing fish moved like liquid stars. He shook his head. "I see patience," he said. 1,000 years of care. Not power, but devotion." Illyra raised her brow slightly. "And do you think your people could ever show such devotion? Or will humans rush ahead, taking what they want, never stopping to preserve what they have?" It was a sharp question, designed to push him. Yet Daniel did not show anger. Instead, he gave a small laugh, not mocking, but thoughtful. "We have much to learn," he admitted. "But every great forest begins with one seed. Perhaps this marriage is that seed." Illyra turned away before he could see the faint change in her expression. His answer was not perfect, yet it held no prideful edge. Still, she told herself it could all be words meant to charm. Later that day, she set another test. She ordered her guards to act coldly toward him, giving no respect and questioning his every step. She wanted to see if he would demand honor, as many nobles did, or lose his temper. But Daniel only smiled at the guards, thanked them for their service, and treated their sharp words as though they were nothing. When one guard sneered that humans had no place in the empire, Daniel replied calmly, "Perhaps not yet. But I hope we will earn it." This puzzled Illyra more than it pleased her. His patience was unusual, almost unnatural. No noble she knew could have endured such treatment without anger. Was this truly his nature, or had Earth trained him carefully for this very role? That evening, as the suns of the capital world set in shades of gold and blue, Illyra sat with her advisor in the quiet of her chamber. "You watch him closely, princess," the advisor said gently. "What do you see?" "I see a man who hides his heart," Illyra answered. "He shows no anger, no pride, no weakness. But no one is without such things. I fear that what I see is not the man himself, but the mask he wears." The advisor bowed his head. "And yet, if the mask is kindness, is that not better than cruelty?" Illyra fell silent. She looked at the wooden bird again, its wings forever lifted. Her heart whispered questions she did not want to ask. Was it possible that Daniel's kindness was not a mask at all? Or was she being drawn into believing what she wished to see? As night settled over the palace, Illyra stood at her balcony, the stars glittering like distant fires. The human's words echoed in her mind, "Perhaps this marriage is the seed." She touched the wooden carving, and for the first time, she wondered if a seed of trust had already been planted within her own heart. The palace had grown heavy with whispers. Every step Princess Illyra took was followed by the curious eyes of nobles who doubted the alliance. Some believed the marriage would never last, while others thought it was a dangerous game that could invite weakness. Illyra carried herself with calm grace, but inside, she felt trapped between her people's pride and her own doubts. The chance for escape came sooner than she expected. One morning, the council gathered in the throne room with urgent news. A border colony of the Empire had sent distress calls. Raiders from the Outer Rim had attacked, burning villages and stealing supplies. The colony was small, but its location was important. If it fell, it would show the galaxy that the Zyori Empire was weak. The council turned to Illyra. "Princess," the elder said, "your presence will calm the people. They must see that their leaders do not abandon them. And since this alliance with Earth is to be made strong, Captain Hayes should join you." Illyra's heart tightened. Travel with the human? Leave the safety of the palace and spend days at his side? She wanted to refuse, but duty left no space for choice. So it was decided. The next day, Illyra boarded a silver starship bound for the border. Daniel walked at her side, his dark uniform sharp against the glowing walls of the ship. He said little, respecting her silence, though his eyes often searched the stars as if studying every corner of the galaxy. The journey lasted 3 days. During that time, Illyra kept her distance. She read reports, spoke with her guards, and reminded herself this was not a journey of companionship but of duty. Yet even in silence, she noticed small things about him. When crew members grew tired, Daniel helped without being asked. When a young pilot dropped a data tablet, Daniel picked it up and handed it back with a smile. He treated everyone, from soldier to servant, with the same steady kindness. On the 3rd day, they arrived. The colony lay scarred beneath a pale sky. Smoke rose from broken houses, and fields once green now burned in black lines. The people gathered as the princess stepped from the ship, their faces filled with both hope and fear. Illyra walked among them with royal calm, speaking words of comfort. Yet what surprised her most was how Daniel moved among the people. He did not stand tall as if to be admired, but knelt to help an old woman rise, lifted heavy crates for farmers, and bandaged the arm of a boy who had been cut. He listened to their stories, nodding as though each voice mattered. At first, Illyra stood apart, watching with cautious eyes. She told herself this was only a display, a way to win her trust. But the longer she watched, the harder it became to believe that. His kindness seemed too natural, too unforced. Later, as the sun dipped low, the colony leaders gathered with Illyra to speak of rebuilding. She gave instructions with clarity and authority, promising support from the Empire. When the meeting ended, she found Daniel outside, helping to carry fresh water to families. "You are not required to do this," Illyra said, her voice even. Daniel set down the container and wiped his brow. "Neither are you, princess. Yet here you are." For the first time, Illyra felt her guard slip. His words were simple, but they carried truth. She walked beside him in silence, watching the children laugh as he showed them the small wooden bird he carried in his pocket. That night, under a sky filled with distant stars, Illyra sat by the colony's fire. Daniel sat across from her, speaking softly with the villagers. The firelight lit his face, not as a soldier or representative, but simply as a man. Illyra looked away quickly, her heart uncertain. She had feared this journey would only deepen her doubts. Instead, it had given her new questions. Could it be that strength was not always in power or pride, but in the quiet kindness she now saw before her? When she finally returned to her tent, she found herself unable to sleep. The sounds of laughter from the villagers still echoed in her ears, mixed with the image of a human who had risked nothing for honor, yet offered everything for strangers. For the first time, Princess Illyra wondered if her heart was beginning to change. The colony began to heal. With supplies delivered and promises of protection renewed, the people found courage again. Princess Illyra felt a quiet pride as she walked through the rebuilt streets. Yet deep inside, she carried new thoughts that troubled her. Every moment spent near Daniel made it harder to keep her heart guarded. She reminded herself that duty demanded caution. But her heart whispered that duty and trust were not always enemies. Their return journey was meant to be safe. The council had ordered patrol ships to guard the border. Still, as their vessel passed through a narrow stretch of dark space, danger found them. The alarm rang across the ship. Shadows moved beyond the windows, raider ships, fast and sharp, sliding from the darkness like wolves. The captain shouted orders, and the Zyori guards rushed to their stations. Illyra stood tall, refusing to show fear, though her heart raced. Daniel appeared at her side. "Stay close," he said firmly. His hand rested near his sidearm, though his eyes remained calm. The raiders struck with sudden fire. The ship shook, lights flickering. Illyra's guards rushed forward, blocking her with their shields, but one blast tore through the hall, throwing them all to the ground. Smoke filled the air, and the cries of wounded echoed. Before Illyra could rise, another blast ripped open part of the corridor. Flames spread, and falling metal crashed dangerously close. For one breathless moment, she saw death rushing toward her. Then Daniel moved. Without thought for himself, he threw his body between her and the falling wreckage. The weight slammed into his shoulder, knocking him to the ground. Pain flashed across his face, yet his arms wrapped around her, shielding her from the fire and steel. "Illyra," one of the guards cried, rushing forward. But the princess could not move. She felt Daniel's breath uneven, his body heavy against hers. He had taken the strike that should have crushed her. "Why?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Daniel struggled to lift himself, his face pale but steady. "Because no life should be lost if I can stop it. Especially yours." The words pierced her heart deeper than the smoke ever could. She had believed humans weak, reckless, unworthy of standing beside her. Yet here was this man, bleeding and broken, refusing to let her come to harm. The guards pulled Daniel free and carried him toward the medbay. Illyra followed, her steps unsteady. She watched as the medics worked quickly, sealing wounds and giving him medicine. Through it all, Daniel did not cry out. He simply looked at her once, his eyes filled not with pride or demand, but with quiet determination. Hours passed. The ship escaped the raiders with help from nearby patrols, but Illyra barely noticed. She sat outside the med bay, her heart heavy. The image of him throwing himself into danger repeated again and again in her mind. Her advisor approached softly. "Princess, the captain asks for your guidance. The people wait for your words." Illyra shook her head. "Not yet. I cannot leave him." The advisor looked surprised but bowed respectfully. When the hall grew quiet again, Illyra rose and stepped inside the med bay. Daniel lay on the bed, his shoulder wrapped in glowing bandages. His breath was slow, but his eyes opened when she approached. "You should rest," she said softly, her voice carrying none of her usual sharpness. He gave a faint smile. "I will, if you promise you're safe." Her chest tightened. She sat beside him, her hand resting gently over his. For the first time, her mask of duty slipped, and the truth in her heart shone through her eyes. "You risked everything," she whispered. "For me. And I treated you as if you were unworthy." Daniel shook his head weakly. "You never had to believe in me. I only had to believe in what was right." Silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of machines. Illyra stared at him, her thoughts no longer guarded. She realized she had judged him unfairly, blinded by fear and pride. This man, this human, had shown more courage than many nobles of her people. As the night stretched on, she stayed by his side, refusing to leave. The wooden bird still sat in his pocket, its wings carved in eternal flight. Illyra touched it gently, as though it carried the strength of his spirit. And for the first time, she did not see Daniel Hayes as an outsider or a burden. She saw him as a man who had given her life more value than his own. The princess who had once feared a human husband now feared something else entirely, losing him. The days following the ambush were quiet, but the quiet carried weight. Princess Illyra could not stop thinking about Daniel. His courage, his selflessness, and the calm strength he had shown under fire haunted her thoughts. For the first time, she began to see the human not as a stranger or a fragile outsider, but as someone worthy of respect, and perhaps more. Illyra spent much of her time in the med bay, checking on Daniel's recovery. He insisted he was fine, but the bandages on his shoulder and arms told another story. She watched him speak to the medics with patience, his voice calm, steady, and encouraging. When one young medic faltered, Daniel offered quiet guidance rather than criticism. It was as if danger had not hardened him, but refined him. Each moment she observed him, Illyra found herself studying his actions. The way he helped without being asked, the way he listened to every voice, and the way he treated even the smallest concerns with care, it was unlike anything she had expected from a human. One morning, as sunlight poured through the medbay windows, Illyra sat beside him. Daniel had been resting, yet his eyes followed her as she entered. She held the wooden bird in her hand, the little carving of wings spread wide. "You keep this with you everywhere," she said softly, placing it on the table. Daniel glanced at it and smiled faintly. "It reminds me of home. And of the promise I made, long before I arrived here." Illyra's gaze softened. "You keep promises, even when it is difficult." Even when it puts you in danger. He nodded. Yes. Some promises are worth more than life itself. Her heart stirred, a feeling unfamiliar but undeniable. She had spent years guarding her emotions, believing that vulnerability was weakness. Yet here, in the presence of a human who had risked everything for her, she felt something stronger than fear, something that called for trust, admiration, and perhaps even love. Over the next days, Illyra began to speak more openly with Daniel. She shared stories of her childhood in the palace, of the lessons she had been taught about duty and honor, and of the weight she carried as a princess. Daniel listened without interruption, offering only gentle comments and encouragement. He never judged her, never demanded obedience, and never flaunted his own beliefs. "You are strong," he said one afternoon, as they walked through the palace gardens. "Not because of power or command, but because you carry the care of your people in your heart." Illyra paused, startled by the simplicity and truth in his words. She had never thought of her own strength that way. Humans valued kindness, compassion, and courage in ways her people often overlooked. Perhaps Daniel's world was different, but it held lessons she had not expected to learn. One evening, as they walked beneath glowing trees, the council called for a private meeting with her. A minor dispute had arisen among nobles about the upcoming marriage. Many doubted that a human could honor the princess, much less the empire. Illyra faced them with a confidence she had never known. "Captain Daniel Hayes has shown more courage and care than many here. His actions speak louder than words. If we are to judge our alliance, let it be by deeds, not fear or prejudice." The room fell silent. Nobles shifted uncomfortably, realizing that the princess's voice carried authority, but also reason. For the first time, Illyra spoke not as a daughter of tradition, but as a leader willing to embrace what was right, even if it defied old assumptions. After the meeting, she returned to Daniel, who had been waiting patiently. "You see," she asked softly, a small smile touching her lips. "Some of them begin to understand." Daniel reached for her hand, a simple gesture that made her heart race. "They will understand more as they see us work together," he said. For the first time, Illyra allowed herself to relax completely in his presence. She laughed, a gentle sound that had been absent from her life for far too long. She spoke freely, without the mask of duty or the armor of pride. That night, as the twin moons rose above the palace, Illyra looked at Daniel and felt a quiet certainty. She had feared humans, feared this union, and feared the unknown. But now, she understood something she had never believed possible: courage, kindness, and loyalty were not bound by species. And in Daniel, she saw all three in abundance. For the first time, Princess Illyra felt her heart open, ready to see what could grow between them. The day of the wedding dawned bright and clear over the capital of the Zyori Empire. Golden light spilled over the palace towers, reflecting off crystal spires and the polished floors of the ceremonial hall. Nobles from across the galaxy gathered, their garments shining, their whispers echoing through the vast corridors. Today was meant to be more than a wedding. It was a symbol of hope, of unity, and of the possibility that two very different worlds could join as one. Princess Illyra stood in her chambers, gazing at her reflection. The silver robe she wore shimmered in the sunlight, yet it was her expression that drew her own attention. She had once feared marrying a human. She had doubted Captain Daniel Hayes at every step. Yet now, as she looked at herself, she saw not fear, but confidence and purpose. Her heart had changed, shaped by the courage and kindness of the man who now waited for her at the altar. Daniel stood in the great hall, his dark uniform crisp and simple, yet somehow commanding attention. He did not carry the trappings of royalty, no jeweled medals or ornate decorations. Instead, he carried something far greater: quiet confidence and genuine respect for everyone around him. When he saw Illyra enter, his face lit with a smile that made the room feel warmer. The ceremony began. The high priest spoke words of unity and hope, of two peoples learning from each other, and of the future that lay ahead. As the words flowed, Illyra and Daniel looked into each other's eyes. No fear remained. No doubt. Only understanding and admiration. When it came time to exchange vows, Illyra spoke first. Her voice was clear, steady, and full of feeling. "I once feared what this marriage could mean," she said, "and I doubted the worth of a human beside me. But I have seen courage beyond measure, kindness beyond expectation, and loyalty beyond words. I see now that humanity carries strength in ways my people have not always recognized. Captain Daniel Hayes, I give my hand, my trust, and my heart to you." The hall was silent for a moment, the weight of her words settling over the audience. Then Daniel spoke, his voice firm but gentle. "Princess Illyra, I promise to protect and honor you, not for fame or glory, but because it is the right thing to do. I have learned from your wisdom and your courage, and I vow to walk beside you, not only as a husband but as a partner and friend. Together, we will face whatever comes and work for the future of our people." The high priest pronounced them united. Applause and cheers filled the hall, but Illyra and Daniel only had eyes for each other. For the first time, the past, the fears, the doubts, and the judgments mattered no longer. They were no longer a princess and a captain from different worlds. They were a team, bound by respect, understanding, and care. As the celebrations continued, nobles approached to offer gifts and congratulations. Some were cautious, still uncertain about this human who had won the princess's heart. Yet as they watched Daniel aid a young child who had stumbled, or assist an elderly noble without seeking recognition, their doubts began to fade. Humanity, once underestimated, was revealed not through conquest, but through simple acts of kindness and courage. Illyra walked through the hall, her hand in Daniel's, showing her people that strength was not always measured by titles or age, but by actions. When she spoke to the court, her words carried wisdom that bridged the gap between their worlds. That evening, as the twin moons rose over the palace, Illyra and Daniel stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Fires burned softly in the gardens, and the stars above sparkled like promises waiting to be kept. "Do you remember the wooden bird?" Illyra asked softly, pointing to the small carving Daniel had carried through so much. He smiled, taking it from his pocket. "I kept it because it reminded me of home, and of the journey that brought me here." Illyra touched his hand. "It reminds me of courage, loyalty, and kindness. It reminds me that even in fear, hearts can change." Daniel nodded. "And it reminds us that together, we can shape a future that neither of us could achieve alone." For the first time, the princess who had feared marrying a human truly understood that her heart had found a companion unlike any other. And the man who had risked everything for her had found a partner whose courage and wisdom would walk beside him, shaping a legacy of peace, trust, and hope across the stars. The celebration continued late into the night, yet for Illyra and Daniel, the greatest joy was quiet: the knowledge that fear had given way to understanding, doubt to trust, and hesitation to love. And so, across the galaxy, two worlds joined not only through duty, but through respect, kindness, and the extraordinary courage of two hearts willing to believe in one another.